The young lieutenant looked at her and smiled. "Sergeant, I've reviewed your file. No college degree, no advanced training certifications. I think it's time someone with proper education took charge here." She said nothing. Because what he didn't know was that while he was studying theory in classrooms, she was writing the tactical manuals his professors used to teach him, the ones with her name classified out of every page. From which city in the world are you watching this unfold? Because what I'm about to tell you happens at military bases around the globe every single day. Education versus experience. Paperwork versus battlefield knowledge. Today, you'll see which one really matters when lives are on the line. What happened at Fort Braxton that morning would challenge everything the military thinks it knows about leadership, experience, and the true meaning of qualifications. Have you ever been in a situation where someone with far less experience than you suddenly became your boss because they had the right paperwork? This story isn't just about soldiers. It's about the real value of human experience versus institutional credentials. Here at Hidden Heroes Stories, we bring these forgotten tales of quiet heroism to light. Because real strength has always been silent. And today's story proves that some of the most qualified people are the ones the system overlooks. Sergeant First Class Gloria Kane woke up at 5:27, 3 minutes before her alarm. She'd been doing this for 15 years. Her body clock was more reliable than any timepiece because in combat zones, you didn't have the luxury of hitting snooze. At 44, her reflexes were still sharp as steel, honed by years of staying alive in places where hesitation meant death. Walking through the corridors of Fort Braxton's headquarters building, soldiers greeted her with respectful nods. "Morning, Sergeant Kane." It was a simple greeting, but behind it lay 15 years of combat experience that commanded automatic respect. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 4 in Iraq, and 8 classified operations in places she could never name. But this morning was different. Today, she would face the biggest test of her career. And this test wouldn't come from enemy fire or explosive devices. It would come from bureaucracy. On her desk sat a crisp white envelope bearing the Pentagon seal. Her heart skipped after 15 years. That seal still made her tense. But this time, it was for a different reason entirely. The document inside announced her assignment to the Tactical Operations Manual Revision Committee. The irony wasn't lost on her. Most of these manuals had been written by her own hand a decade ago. Of course, her name appeared nowhere in them. Personnel involved in classified operations had their identities scrubbed from all materials for security reasons. The assignment came with a warning. She'd be working under new leadership. A recent academy graduate with extensive theoretical background would be heading the committee. Gloria had seen this before: fresh officers with perfect grades and zero real-world experience put in charge of veterans who'd actually lived through what the textbooks only theorized about. At 9 o'clock sharp, the committee meeting began. Gloria entered the conference room to find a lieutenant about 18 years her junior standing at the head of the table. His uniform was pristine, his shoes mirror bright, and his West Point class ring caught the fluorescent light. "Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Marcus Reed," the young man said, extending a soft hand that had never pulled a trigger under fire. "Virginia Military Institute, graduated summa cum laude with a master's degree in tactical studies and strategic planning. I've been assigned to lead this committee." Gloria shook his hand, soft, uncalloused, the hands of someone who'd learned warfare from books rather than bullets. "Sergeant First Class Gloria Kane." Marcus shuffled through a file folder. "Sergeant Kane, I've been reviewing your educational background and, well, the academic qualifications seem somewhat limited. High school diploma, basic military training, a few short-term courses. Do you have any theoretical knowledge of tactical operations?" "I have field experience, sir." "Field experience is valuable, of course," Marcus said with a patronizing tone that made the other committee members shift uncomfortably. "But modern military doctrine requires academic research and theoretical analysis. I completed my doctorate work at Virginia Tech, focusing on asymmetric warfare theory." The other committee members, Major Patterson, who'd worked with Gloria for years, and Colonel Williams, who knew glimpses of her real story, exchanged glances. They knew this was heading for disaster, but protocol was protocol, rank was rank. Sergeant Kane, Marcus continued, are you familiar with Clausewitz's theory of war as a continuation of politics by other means, and how it applies to modern asymmetric conflict? Gloria looked at him quietly. She'd read Clausewitz. More than read him, she'd tested his theories in actual combat. But explaining that would serve no purpose here. I have more practical experience than theoretical, sir. Marcus smiled condescendingly. I see. Perhaps it would be best if you took more of a listening role in these meetings. These manuals deal with extremely complex strategic concepts. Have you ever been in a moment like this? When someone with a fraction of your experience tries to educate you about something you've lived through? When your years of hard-won knowledge are dismissed because you don't have the right piece of paper? Gloria was living every veteran's nightmare, being lectured about war by someone who'd never heard a shot fired in anger. The meeting continued. Marcus opened his PowerPoint presentation. This morning, we'll be reviewing the Urban Warfare Tactics Manual. This document contains the most current techniques for combat in urban environments. Gloria stared at the screen. It looked familiar. She'd written those pages while dodging sniper fire in Fallujah, scribbling tactics in a notebook during the brief lulls between firefights. This section, Marcus said, pointing with a laser pointer, covers building clearing techniques in urban warfare, but I find it somewhat theoretical. Could operations really be this systematic in actual combat? Gloria's fist clenched under the table. She had cleared those buildings. She had developed those techniques while watching good soldiers die because the old methods didn't work. Sir, she said quietly, those techniques are based on real field experience. Field experience is important, Marcus replied, but without academic analysis, experience remains merely anecdotal. I worked with Professor Hamilton at Virginia, a real authority on warfare studies, to understand these concepts properly. Major Patterson couldn't stay silent. Marcus, Sergeant Kane's experience. Major Patterson, Marcus interrupted, let's maintain proper hierarchy here. I'm responsible for this committee. Gloria nodded silently to Major Patterson. It's okay, her expression said. Let him talk. Marcus continued his presentation. Each page brought back memories for Gloria. The sniper positioning in urban environments section contained techniques she'd developed on Ramadi rooftops. The counter-IED procedures chapter included protocols she'd written after watching her friend Specialist Thompson get torn apart by a roadside bomb. These IED procedures are interesting, Marcus mused, but they seem overly simplistic. Real explosive devices must be more complex than this. Gloria's breathing quickened. Those devices weren't complex, they were deadly. And those procedures were written with Thompson's blood still on her hands, ensuring no other soldier would make the same fatal mistake. Sir, she said slowly, those procedures were developed against real threats. I'm sure they were, Marcus replied, but without theoretical foundation, these are just trial and error methods. I studied explosive engineering at MIT, much more sophisticated approaches there. The room fell silent. Colonel Williams watched Gloria with growing concern. This was building toward an explosion. Marcus pressed on, oblivious to the tension. You know, Sergeant Kane, whoever wrote these manuals must have been quite experienced. I wonder why their names aren't listed. Gloria's heart stopped. This was the moment. She could reveal the truth or maintain her silence. Personnel involved in classified operations have their names removed for security reasons, sir. I see, Marcus nodded. So where are these authors now? Retired? Moved to other positions? Colonel Williams started to speak. Marcus, perhaps. Colonel, please, Marcus interrupted. This is important. If we could speak with these experienced authors, we could learn so much from them. Gloria slowly stood up, gathering her files. Sir, could we take a break? Of course, Sergeant. 10 minutes. During the break, Colonel Williams approached Gloria. Can you handle this? Yes, sir. 1. The kid doesn't know. Your file is classified. If I told him, Now. No, sir. Protocol is protocol. Major Patterson joined them. This is ridiculous, Gloria. You wrote those manuals and this fool is lecturing you about them. The ridiculous part isn't that, Gloria said. The ridiculous part is a system that values diplomas over battle scars. When the break ended, Marcus resumed his presentation. Now we'll review the Night Operations Manual. This one seems particularly amateurish. The section on night vision technology is quite superficial. Gloria had written that manual in Baghdad after 3 months of nightly patrols through hostile territory. Every technique had been learned while tracking enemy movements through night vision goggles. For example, Marcus pointed to a paragraph. This section on infrared signature masking is far too basic. I learned much more advanced methods in my thermal imaging courses at Caltech. Have those methods been tested in actual combat, sir? Gloria asked. Marcus looked annoyed. Sergeant, that's not how scientific method works. Theory first, then application. In war, it's the opposite, sir. Survival first, then theory. Sergeant Kane, Marcus said, his tone hardening, I think we need to clarify who's in charge here. I'm leading this committee. Your job is to listen to my analysis and provide support. The room tensed. Gloria had faced moments like this for 15 years, times when rank prevented her from speaking truth to power, but when she knew she was right. Sir, Gloria said, making her decision, you mentioned wanting to know about the person who wrote these manuals. Yes, I'm curious. Who could it be? Which university did they work at? What think tank did they research for? Gloria took a deep breath. None of them, sir. What do you mean? The person who wrote these manuals never worked at a university, never conducted research at a think tank, never held an academic position. Marcus looked puzzled. Then how did they acquire such detailed knowledge? Because they wrote these manuals on the battlefield, sir. In the streets of Fallujah, on the rooftops of Ramadi, during the long nights in Baghdad. Under gunfire, between explosions. Silence fell over the room. Marcus began looking at Gloria more carefully. What are you saying, Sergeant? Gloria placed her folder on the table and withdrew a document, old, worn, stained in places that spoke of violence and sacrifice. These are my original notes from Fallujah, sir. The first draft of the Urban Warfare Tactics Manual. Those stains are blood from when my soldier was hit while I was writing. Marcus removed his glasses to clean them, hands beginning to tremble. Sergeant, what are you trying to tell me? Gloria stood at attention, 15 years of military bearing straightening her shoulders. What I'm trying to tell you, sir, is that I wrote these manuals, every page, every paragraph, every procedure, because those procedures saved my soldiers' lives. And now you're trying to lecture me about the books I wrote. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus's face went white. The folder in his hands began to shake. This isn't possible, he stammered. You're just a sergeant. These manuals require general-level approval. Colonel Williams stood up. Marcus, meet Sergeant First Class Gloria Kane. 15 years active combat duty, 8 classified operations. The most prolific author in tactical operations publications. And yes, she wrote those books. Major Patterson added, Gloria served as tactical advisor to Joint Special Operations Command. She attended strategic planning meetings at the Pentagon. And she never had time to pursue academic qualifications because she was constantly deployed. Marcus's hand was shaking. But the degree, qualifications. I have qualifications, sir, Gloria said. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Combat Action Badge, and most importantly, a 15-year record of never losing a soldier under my command. This wasn't just a lesson for Marcus, it was a reckoning for everyone in that room about what the system truly valued. About how bureaucracy could blind institutions to the very expertise sitting right in front of them. Sergeant Kane, Marcus said, his voice cracking. I didn't know. This information isn't in your file. Personnel records for classified operations are kept separately, sir. Security protocol. Then I was trying to teach you. Yes, sir. And I listened. Because I respect the chain of command. Marcus sat down heavily. Sergeant, in that case, I could learn so much from you. You could, sir. But first you need to learn this. Diplomas make you smart, but experience makes you wise. And in war, wisdom matters more. The most powerful part of this story isn't just Gloria's vindication, it's Marcus's education. The young lieutenant began every briefing after that day with, "I'm still learning." He asked Gloria for mentorship. Most importantly, he learned to listen first when working with experienced NCOs. The committee functioned differently from that day forward. Gloria's experience combined with Marcus's theoretical knowledge. New manuals contained both academic rigor and real battlefield wisdom. But here's why this story matters. It happens everywhere, every day. Experienced workers get overlooked because they lack formal credentials. Knowledge earned through blood and sacrifice gets dismissed in favor of pieces of paper. Gloria's story isn't just military, it's universal. This is the experienced craftsman dismissed by the fresh MBA. The veteran nurse ignored by the new hospital administrator. The seasoned mechanic overlooked for the engineering graduate. Yet Gloria's story also offers hope, because real value eventually surfaces. False credentials are temporary. Genuine competence is permanent. Have you ever faced this situation? At work? In school? In life? When your experience was valued less than someone else's paperwork? This might be your story too. Because we all have a Gloria Kane inside us, undervalued, underestimated, but absolutely essential. What happened at Fort Braxton that day spread throughout the base like wildfire. Not as gossip, but as education. The story became a teaching tool about the difference between credentials and competence. Master Sergeant Williams, a 30-year veteran, found himself telling younger soldiers about that day. Remember, he'd say, the quietest person in the room might be the most qualified. Don't mistake silence for ignorance. Captain Rodriguez, fresh from West Point himself, changed how he approached veteran NCOs. Instead of assuming he knew better because of his rank, he asked questions. He learned that his geology degree didn't teach him how to read terrain under enemy fire, but Sergeant First Class Martinez could teach him that in 5 minutes. The change wasn't immediate or universal. Institutional bias doesn't disappear overnight. But seeds were planted. Young officers began valuing experience alongside education. Veteran NCOs found their voices again, knowing they'd be heard rather than dismissed. But let's talk about what this cost, Gloria. Because standing up to the system isn't free. For weeks after the incident, she dealt with whispers. Some called her a troublemaker. Others suggested she'd been disrespectful to an officer. The military, like any large institution, doesn't always reward those who expose its flaws. Gloria endured formal reviews of her conduct. She sat through meetings where superior officers questioned whether she'd overstepped her bounds. The irony was brutal. The woman who'd literally written the book on military tactics was being questioned about military protocol. "Do you regret speaking up?" Major Patterson asked her one evening as they walked across the base. Gloria considered the question. Regret is for people who don't speak up when they should. I've buried too many soldiers who died because someone with rank ignored someone with experience. 3 months later, Pentagon brass visited Fort Braxton for a routine inspection. Word of the manual committee incident had reached higher levels, not as scandal but as an example of hidden talent in the ranks. General Patricia Hayes, a woman who'd fought her own battles against military bureaucracy, requested a private meeting with Gloria. "Sergeant Kane," the general said, "I've read your work, both the classified versions and the sanitized training materials, some of the finest tactical writing I've encountered." "Thank you, ma'am. I'm not offering compliments. I'm offering opportunities. How would you feel about teaching at the War College?" Gloria was quiet for a long moment. "With respect, ma'am, I belong with soldiers, not students. General Hayes smiled. What if I told you the students would be colonels and generals who need to remember what they learned when they were lieutenants? 6 months after the committee meeting, the Army implemented new protocols for technical writing positions. Experience became a qualification equal to education. Combat veterans were fast-tracked for instructional roles. The Gloria Kane Protocol, as some called it, ensured that institutional knowledge wasn't lost to bureaucratic oversight. Marcus Reed, now a first lieutenant, had become one of Gloria's strongest advocates. He'd learned that leadership meant recognizing expertise wherever it existed, regardless of rank or credentials. She taught me more in 6 months than 4 years of academy classes, he told his former classmates during a reunion. I thought I knew about warfare because I could quote Sun Tzu. She taught me that war isn't philosophy, it's survival. The committee's revised manuals became the new standard for military training. They combined theoretical framework with practical application. Most importantly, they credited their sources, including the classified contributors whose names could finally be acknowledged in secure settings. Today, Gloria still serves as Sergeant First Class. She never sought promotion to officer ranks, despite multiple offers. NCOs are the backbone of the military, she explains. I'd rather be a strong backbone than a weak head. Her manuals are used in military academies worldwide. Her techniques have saved countless lives in Iraq, Afghanistan, and conflicts that remain classified. Young officers learn her methods without knowing her name, the ultimate irony for someone who spent years having her identity scrubbed from her own work. But perhaps the most important change is cultural. At Fort Braxton and beyond, there's new respect for institutional knowledge. The wisdom of experienced NCOs carries weight equal to academic credentials. The system hasn't been perfected, bureaucracy is too entrenched for that, but it's been improved. This story matters because it's not unique. Right now, in offices and factories and hospitals around the world, there are people like Gloria Kane, experienced workers whose knowledge gets dismissed because it wasn't acquired in classrooms. Veterans whose skills are undervalued because they lack formal credentials. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you've been in that meeting where someone half your age with twice your education tried to explain your job to you. Maybe you've watched while promotions went to people with degrees rather than people with results. Or maybe you're Marcus Reed. Maybe you're the one with credentials but without experience. If so, this story isn't meant to diminish your education. It's meant to remind you that wisdom comes from many sources. The most successful leaders are those who recognize expertise wherever they find it, who understand that a diploma proves you can learn, but experience proves you can apply what you've learned under pressure. Fort Braxton is quiet now in the early morning hours. Sergeant First Class Gloria Kane still wakes up at 5:27, 3 minutes before her alarm. She still walks the corridors with the same quiet confidence. But something has changed in the respect she sees in people's eyes. The young soldiers who salute her know they're saluting more than rank. They're saluting wisdom earned in the hardest classroom of all. The officers who work with her know they're working with someone whose knowledge was forged in fire. Her office now displays a plaque, not for any medal or commendation, but with a simple inscription. Experience is the teacher of all things. Julius Caesar. Every morning, she reads reports from commanders using her tactics in active theaters. Every evening, she reviews lesson plans from instructors teaching her methods to new soldiers. Her work continues to save lives, even when her name remains classified. This is what quiet heroism looks like. Not the flashy courage of Hollywood war movies, but the steady strength of professionals who do their jobs with excellence, regardless of recognition. Gloria's story reminds us that the most important qualifications can't be printed on paper. They're written in scars and memories, in lessons learned under pressure, in the knowledge that comes from keeping others alive when everything is falling apart. Real strength has always been silent. Real heroes don't need their names in history books. They just need to know their work mattered. And in conference rooms and classrooms around the world, Gloria Kane's work continues to matter. Every soldier who comes home alive because of her tactics. every young officer who learns to listen before lecturing, every veteran who finds their voice because someone else spoke truth to power. That's the real victory. Not the moment of vindication in a committee meeting, but the lifetime of service that made that moment inevitable. The next time you encounter someone whose experience doesn't match their credentials, remember Gloria Kane. Listen before you lecture. Ask before you assume. And remember that the quietest person in the room might have the loudest voice, they're just choosing when to use it. Because real strength has always been silent. But when it speaks, the world listens. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone whose experience deserves recognition. Someone who speaks quietly but carries wisdom. Because every story of quiet heroism deserves to be told. After all, we're all students in someone else's classroom. And the best teachers are often the ones without the titles. 2 years after that committee meeting, Lieutenant Marcus Reed, now Captain Reed, received orders for his first combat deployment. As he prepared to leave Fort Braxton, he made one final visit to Gloria's office. "Sergeant Kane," he said, standing at attention despite their now familiar working relationship, "I wanted to thank you properly before I deploy." Gloria looked up from the after-action report. She was reviewing another successful operation using tactics she'd developed in Fallujah. "For what, sir?" "For teaching me the difference between knowing and understanding, between information and wisdom, between being educated and being ready." Marcus placed a small wrapped package on her desk. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, its pages blank and waiting. The inscription on the cover read, "For the lessons that can't be taught in classrooms." "Sir, this isn't necessary." "Yes, it is," Marcus interrupted gently. "Because in 3 weeks, I'll be leading soldiers in combat for the first time, and everything I know about keeping them alive, I learned from you." Gloria studied the young officer's face. The cocky confidence of academy graduation had been replaced by something deeper, the quiet competence that comes from understanding the weight of command. "You'll do fine, Captain. You learn to listen. That's the most important qualification any leader can have." After Marcus left, Gloria opened the notebook to its first page. She began writing. Lesson 1. The most important things you'll learn about leadership can't be taught in any academy. They can only be passed down from one soldier to another. 3 months later, she received word from Afghanistan. Captain Reed's unit had successfully completed their first major operation, a complex urban assault that required exactly the kind of flexible thinking and experienced judgment that Gloria had tried to teach him. No soldiers were lost. The mission was a complete success. And in his after-action report, Captain Reed made sure to note the tactical manual sections that had proved most valuable sections written years earlier by a sergeant whose name would never appear in the official record. The cycle continued. Knowledge passed from experience to education, from battlefield to classroom, from quiet professional to the next generation of leaders. This is how institutions truly evolve, not through policy changes or organizational charts, but through individual moments when wisdom finds its voice and someone else learns to listen. Gloria Kane still wakes up at 5:27 every morning, still walks the corridors of Fort Braxton with quiet confidence, still writes the manuals that keep soldiers alive in places whose names remain classified. But now, when young officers arrive at her door with questions about tactics or leadership, they come not with assumptions about her limitations, but with recognition of her expertise. They understand that the most valuable lessons come not from what someone studied, but from what someone survived. And somewhere in Afghanistan, Captain Marcus Reed leads his soldiers with the kind of practical wisdom that can't be learned from books. Wisdom that was passed down from a sergeant who understood that real education happens when experience meets respect. The story continues. The lessons spread. And the quiet heroes keep teaching, one conversation at a time. 5 years have passed since that committee meeting changed everything at Fort Braxton. Gloria's influence has spread far beyond a single base or even a single military. Her tactical innovations, once buried in classified files, have been adapted by Allied forces across 3 continents. In a forward operating base in Eastern Europe, A British colonel uses Gloria's urban warfare techniques to train Ukrainian resistance fighters. He doesn't know her name, it's still classified, but her methods have saved dozens of lives in Mariupol and Kharkiv. At the Australian Defence Force Academy, instructors teach a course called Practical Leadership Dynamics that's based entirely on the Fort Braxton incident. Young cadets learn that their future success depends not on what they know, but on how well they recognize what others know. In a dusty training camp in Jordan, Jordanian Special Forces practice building-clearing techniques that Gloria developed during her third tour in Fallujah. The Arabic translation of her manual sits dog-eared and coffee-stained on every instructor's desk. The ripples continue expanding. Corporate leadership programs now include case studies about the danger of dismissing institutional knowledge. Medical schools teach resident doctors about learning from experienced nurses. Engineering firms have restructured their hierarchies to value field experience alongside academic credentials. Gloria Kane never intended to change anything beyond keeping her soldiers alive. She never sought recognition, promotion, or fame. She simply refused to let ignorance masquerade as authority when lives hung in the balance. But that's how real change happens, not through grand gestures or dramatic proclamations, but through quiet moments when someone with wisdom finds the courage to speak truth to power. Through individual decisions to value substance over credentials, experience over assumptions, character over charisma. Today, in conference rooms and classrooms around the world, people ask different questions. Not, "What's your degree?" but "What's your experience?" Not, "Where did you study?" but "What did you learn?" Not, "What's your title?" but "What's your story?" That's Gloria Kane's true legacy. Not the manuals she wrote or the lives she saved, though both matter immensely. Her real contribution is the cultural shift she helped create. The understanding that wisdom comes in many forms, and true leadership means recognizing expertise wherever it exists. That's Gloria Kane's true legacy. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that changing the world doesn't require changing everything at once. Sometimes it just requires one person, in one moment, having the courage to say, "I wrote those manuals." Sometimes revolution begins with quiet truth spoken in a conference room at 09:15 on a Tuesday morning. Sometimes the most powerful words aren't shouted from podiums or written in history books. Sometimes they're whispered by someone who's been silent for too long, finally finding their voice when it matters most. Because real strength has always been silent, until the moment it chooses to speak. As you finish watching this story, take a moment to look around. Look at the people in your workplace, your community, your family. Look for the quiet ones, the ones who don't boast about their achievements, the ones whose experience runs deeper than their credentials suggest. They're everywhere. The nurse who's seen every emergency but never talks about it. The mechanic who can diagnose problems by sound alone. The grandmother who raised 5 children while working 2 jobs and somehow made it look easy. The veteran who came home changed but never complains. These are the Gloria Kanes of the world, and they're waiting for someone to recognize their wisdom, to value their experience, to give them the respect they've earned through years of quiet service. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe your story needs to be told. Maybe your expertise deserves recognition. Maybe it's time to stop being silent about what you know. Or maybe you're the Marcus Reed in someone else's story. Maybe you have the power to listen instead of lecture, to learn instead of assume, to recognize instead of dismiss. Either way, remember this: every expert was once a beginner, but not every beginner becomes wise. Wisdom comes from experience. Experience comes from making mistakes, surviving challenges, and learning lessons that can't be taught in any classroom. The choice is yours. Will you be the one who speaks up when expertise is dismissed? Will you be the one who listens when wisdom whispers? Will you be the one who recognizes that the most important qualifications are written not on paper, but in the lives we've lived? The story continues, and you're part of it.